guys, welcome to my first video on my channel that isn't like an old animation from 5 years ago. So I know this horse has been absolutely beaten to death within the past few weeks, but I wanted to give my own 2 sand dollars on it. Or I may just be using this as an excuse for me to talk and draw Byler fan art. Now, I've been a Stranger Things and Byler fan since 2022, which I know I'm a little late, but we'll ignore that. And I got increasingly obsessed with Byler when the Season 5 promo started, and during all of that, I realized how much it seemed possible that Byler could happen, and how much I really related to Byers specifically, which I think a lot of the queer audience felt the same way. So, imagine my disappointment when fast forward a few months later into the night of the finale and seeing how the Duffer Brothers tried to end both Byler and Will's storyline in a way that completely fell flat. I have a bunch of different points I want to talk about in this video, so I'm just going to go down the list and discuss each one before I go on a tangent and forget what I was talking about. First off, what is queerbaiting? Queerbaiting, according to Wikipedia, is a marketing technique for fiction and entertainment in which creators hint at but do not depict same-sex romance or other LGBTQ representation to attract or bait a queer straight ally audience with the suggestion or possibility of relationships or characters that appeal to them. Mouthful. I'll also throw on screen a few other definitions from other sites that give a similar explanation. Now, I'll show some of the most popular posts from Netflix that depict the company using Byler as queerbait. Now, I know some people may try to argue that these examples don't actually qualify as queerbaiting, so let's dive into why it actually is. The most popular way people try to disprove this is by saying, but it can't be queerbait because Will's gay, right? Which is not true. Even if one of the characters is gay, that doesn't mean it's good enough, and they can just throw away the whole pairing and assume it has appeased everyone. I'm going to put up a video from a TikTok creator that actually explains this a little bit better than I can.
I would like to propose a theory to the Gay Council, okay? And this theory is that there's this new style of queerbaiting ever since 2020. And this new style is one of the characters is either canonically queer or has some romantic feelings there, right? But then the other side of the pairing, you don't really know what's going on with this one. You don't know what's going on in their head. It's just kind of left in the air, and story ends are not completed, and it's just, then you can go, it's just a one-sided queer romance. So you can't say that it's queer baiting because, look, there's the queer, right? But what's happening with this one? What's this geezer feeling, you know? What was Dean Winchester feeling? What was Mike Wheeler feeling, right? But there's clearly chemistry between the two of them. And if it was a straight couple, it would be evident that they're going to get together, and they would put them together. But then even then, with this canonically queer or romantically involved one, there's either vagueness or an erasure of feelings. Castiel's confession in Supernatural could be read as either romantic or platonic, right? There are people still online to this day that think that Cass's confession was platonic. And I know that Misha came forward to say, no, Cass meant it romantically, but what did the writers want it to be? I think they wanted it to be vague so they could give a shred to these queer fans that were the majority of their audience, but appease the straight fans that ultimately they liked more. And they dragged it out for 11 seasons, okay? And then we got on to Will Byers. Will Byers was in love with his best friend for years. And then in the second to last episode, they turned it into a hallway crush. And it's just a lesson about him being gay. I don't know about you, but if you're a gay person that was in love with your best friend for years and you couldn't tell them, it's not just a hallway crush. If anything, it haunts you still as an adult, right? You could speak about Stranger Things doing this. You could speak about Supernatural doing this. You could speak about 911 doing this. You could speak about Loki doing this. There are so many examples, right? I feel like we need to create a new umbrella. We need to talk about this new style because it still feels like a punch in the gut. It still feels. It just makes me angry. Okay, they're being covert with it, but it's still there.
This exactly explains what's wrong here, which is that Stranger Things wanted to have their cake and eat it too. They wanted the appeal of the characters to have something between them, but they still wanted to get away with keeping their main couple in a way that could keep their straight audience and give the queer audience something to nibble at, even if it's just scraps, because they know that they can get away with it if they hint at it just enough for it to not pass as a problem. My next point is how they never gave Will what he wanted in the entire series, which was romantic love. Within the entire show, every single character experienced a romantic relationship, including side characters. But the one character who did not get a clear on-screen relationship was Will. What makes this even worse is that they gave Will the line, "I'm not gonna fall in love," in Season 3 and did nothing to change it. Why give Will that line of dialogue if it doesn't actually affect his story? Why purposely set up a narrative if you don't actually go through with it? This specific dialogue makes it that much more obvious of how they tried to swim past actually making the ship happen just to keep the majority of their audience. Now I want to explain how that can come off as negative to people who relate to his struggles. The very basic message that queer people could get from this is that if you have a person you've been in love with for years, they're basically just a crush that you need to get over and move on from to help accept yourself. The way the show turned Will's love for Mike into a life lesson of moving on is even more frustrating when you realize what kind of example it sets for real queer people. We already know that the media like this can affect real life, either it be homophobia rising online because of it, which we'll get into later in the video, or be the way it affects the queer people who watch the show and what message it sends to them about their lives and experiences. I know this video is mainly about Byler, but I do also want to discuss why an 11 still doesn't truthfully work. The whole problem with the pairing in Season 4, which was the main plot point, was that Mike and Al couldn't communicate well, which led to Will needing to intervene and express his own feelings and disguise them as Al's to try and fix the relationship. Despite the fact that Mike finally did communicate to Al in the finale of Season 4, the problem was never directly fixed due to the fact that Will was still the one who guided him to speak about his feelings during that moment, and without him, Mike's whole monologue wouldn't have happened. When we watch Volume 1 of Season 5, the communication issue isn't ever addressed as fixed. They rarely even see each other the entire 4 episodes. And then when we watch Volume 2, the problem is still not resolved on screen, nor do they have any communication that gives us a sense that something has been fixed. But when the finale rolls around and we get to the ending where Elle sacrifices herself, we see the entire miscommunication plot from Season 4 and arguably Season 5 get checked out the window for a poor attempt of a heartfelt kiss scene to make us forget all the troubles a relationship has had. And this kiss doesn't even feel earned after seeing them barely interact the entire season and doesn't feel like it had any meaning behind it besides using it as a moment to shove a montage in our face of all the times that they were around each other in the show so the Duffer Brothers can basically say, "See? No problems here. It was all sorted out off screen." Another point that I wanted to talk about relating to Elle is that her death can also be seen as something negative to people who relate to her and her struggles, just like with Will. The agenda this ending pushes is that you need to sacrifice yourself to stop the cycle of abuse. When you create a main character that goes through years of abuse and trauma that also feels like she's a mistake because of it and that she doesn't belong, and you kill her off at the end, what kind of message is that supposed to convey? Now I want to get into the point I mentioned earlier about how the shutting down of Byler has become a target for rampant online homophobia. Since the finale, and even as early as Volume 2's release, people online have been using this as a kind of gotcha moment to make fun of queer fans for being delusional for thinking Byler could happen in the show. Even when we just had Volume 1 to work with, people were throwing around slurs and specifically targeting Byler fans and the character of Will Byers for their homophobic remarks to make fun of them. And one of the worst things about this is the fact that neither of the Duffer Brothers bothered to address any of the hate online towards their own fans until after the show ended. And even with that, they still didn't actually address the problems and why they're happening or that it should be stopped in the first place. And just to make it more obvious that what Netflix is doing is very obviously queerbaiting, I'll throw in some other recent examples of how this has happened before with this company, which might be biased because both of these examples are ships that I enjoy. The first one I'll mention is Claire, which is the pairing Wednesday and Enid from Netflix's show Wednesday. I'll show those on screen. And the second one I'll mention is Inhun, which is the pairing Gihan and Inho from Netflix's show Squid Game. In all of these posts, Netflix is doing the exact same thing with each series. They'll make posts related to the ship to advertise and garner attention from queer people to get them to watch the show, and then never actually follow through with their own marketing. Their whole goal is to be appealing. That's what the marketing is, because queerbait is a marketing tactic. So finally, what is our takeaway from this? TLDR, Netflix sucks at handling queer non-canon ships, and the company uses the same tactics with multiple different popular shows in attempts to gain a larger audience. They do not truly care about queer people. They just want our attention and our creative voices so we can also garner attention towards it ourselves. Alright, drawing's about to finish any minute now. Thank you for watching me rant for around 10 minutes now while drawing gay fan art. I hope you enjoyed. I don't know how much I'll post here, but I do plan to talk more about other things I have thoughts about in my little coconut head. Bye-bye, pie.